Welcome to another episode of the Common Questions podcast series. My name is Jonathan Ciecka, and I'm joined here today by Mr. Brayden Armstrong. Brayden, thanks for coming on.
Good to be here.
So, Brayden, let's start at the beginning. Tell me a little bit about your life growing up. What was life like for you?
Well, I was born into a household that was fairly devout from what I could tell growing up. They were in the Church of God tradition. My mom and dad never got married, so it's very interesting considering what we're talking about today. But they never got married, so I was had a kind of rough emotional upbringing in that regard. We can get into that more, but one thing I always knew, my family really loved me. Like my grandma and my grandpa, they really stepped in and were super involved with my life. And yeah, I just really felt loved. Didn't have a lot growing up, didn't have a lot of finances, but always had love. And so, and my grandma, she taught me to follow the Lord. She taught me a lot about Scripture. She was very faithful in that regard. So, yeah.
And would you say it was through your grandma that you really came into a relationship with God, or did that happen later? What was that like?
She definitely was a huge influence on why I would end up coming to the faith, I think. I think a lot of the stuff she instilled in me, a lot of the conversations, like just the faithfulness that she showed with her life, very much so, like, was an influence when I came back to faith. I went through some years where, I think a lot of kids do when they're a teenager, really strayed from the faith. I had a lot of doubts, a lot of questions, kind of went into some agnosticism. But ultimately, I ended up coming back to the faith right after I graduated high school. I just had a lot of questions. I looked into apologetics, ended up just making the decision. I believed that Jesus was a real person and that he rose, and ended up giving my life to Christ intellectually at that point. And then as time went on, a couple years later, I had a moment where I really feel like I gave my heart to Christ and actually fell in love with Jesus. So
awesome.
Yeah.
And then after that point, along that way, who would you say is someone who has helped you grow in the faith? What give us an example of like a discipleship experience that you've had?
Yeah, Greg Swords would probably be someone who was super influential in that one-on-one actual like in-person discipleship. YouTube's a huge thing nowadays, so I had a lot of people I would observe on YouTube and learn from. I didn't have a lot of Christian community when I was initially coming to the faith, but when I first moved here, Greg Swords really poured into me a lot, and he was the first person I think really showed me like the grace and love of Christ. I had this kind of view of God almost as like this kind of like upset dad in the sky kind of thing. And I feel like Greg really helped me see him as a loving father who was ready and willing, almost like the prodigal son, a passage in Scripture, who was ready and willing to forgive me and like welcome me with open arms. So he was super influential in that regard.
Awesome. So I want to dig into that for just a second, because I think that's a very common struggle that people have, especially if they're coming out of a more legalistic background. God is an angry dad just waiting to throw the lightning bolts down at me. What is it that he did specifically that you would say helped help you get a better understanding of the character of God?
Yeah, well, in complete transparency, when I first started to attend here, I was still very much in process with my sanctification, and Greg saw a lot of brunt, kind of front end of that, and so I just brought to him a confession, and he reacted just totally different than what I expected from my upbringing, and he showed me such grace and understanding and walked with me through it, and he was like, God, and he just told me, God's not mad at you. He's like, God wants you to run to him. And he was like, in the same way you see me right now treating you with grace, that's what the Father's doing, and even more so. And that was just a watershed moment in my life where I was like, wow, like God really loves me, and he's not here like to condemn me or to just tell me I suck initially, but he's here to help me actually grow and become more like his son. And so, yeah, that was just a huge moment in my sanctification where I was like, wow, God really loves me and wants me to grow. He's not here to punish me. So,
yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
And that actually makes a pretty good segue into what we're talking about today. Some pretty light, jovial topics, some might say.
Controversial at all.
No, not at all. Today's topic is sex, marriage, and cohabitation. So there's a lot of different ways we could take this. We're going to start with just an understanding of, biblically, from a Christian perspective, how should we view things like marriage and intimacy and physical intimacy, these different kinds of things. Let's just get started. When we talk about marriage, what are we talking about here?
It's also not controversial at all. Biblically speaking, it is a unique picture of the gospel. It is a covenant between two people who show Christ in his church. Mm-hmm. It's a sacrificial giving of oneself for the sake of the other. It's ultimately the most unselfish thing you can do, I think, on earth in terms of relationship. And it is a union and a joining and a covenant between two people. So yeah, I would say that's biblically kind of a good one-hitter answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so we can talk from just personal experience as well. I'm married, you're married. How long have you been married for?
A year and like 2 weeks.
That's awesome. Very cool. What'd you do for your anniversary?
Well, we will actually not be doing anything on our anniversary because her salon is having their grand opening, and I am doing an event with the college ministry. So we're going to go to dinner the day before and have a really nice dinner at our favorite place.
Awesome. Very cool. And I've been married for almost 5 years now. So we have some personal experience, bona fides, but not that personal experience is everything, but we're talking from a little bit of knowledge on that. And then let's also get into it with just a positive biblical understanding of what the role of sex is within a marriage relationship, what its relationship is to marriage. Where would you say a good starting point for that is?
Well, with sex specifically, I believe it should only be in the confines of a covenantal, protective, self-giving marriage. And it's really like a momentary picture of what the marriage is as a whole. It's a joining of two to become one. It is a giving of oneself for the sake of the other. It is a moment of pleasure and joy, and it brings life into the equation. And so just as the marriage in the more external sense, like it's finances joining, it's two lives joining, it's all these things. Biblical sex is the joining of these things in a moment in a very beautiful, intimate way. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And let's say that I'm someone who's either new to the faith or not a Christian, and I'm trying to understand, why is it that Christians are so insistent that we can only have sex if we're married? If this is a good and enjoyable thing and we're both enjoying it, what's wrong with us not having a piece of paper before we start enjoying this good thing?
Yeah, well, a couple things on that. I think the first thing is when it's not inside a covenant marriage, it's more selfish. Sex wasn't meant to be selfish; it was meant to be selfless. Mm-hmm. It's a act of service to another person together, a mutual giving of self. And so, when it's outside of that protection, you're essentially lying to one another. You're essentially doing this action. I mean, every action I could do, I'm communicating a message. So if I were to like grab this cup and throw it in your face, I'm communicating some kind of message. If I were to give you a handshake, I'm communicating a message. If I hug you, I'm communicating a message. If I kiss someone on the cheek, I'm communicating a message. If I kiss someone on the lips, it's another message. So everything we do is communicating some kind of message. And so in the act of sex, if we are coming and joining our bodies together in a way that is supposed to be mutually exclusive to communicate protection and commitment and loyalty and selflessness and even long-term fidelity. If we're doing this act, that's communicating something to us on an emotional and spiritual level. And so if the expectation is that this is going to be just a moment and it's not going to be the rest of our lives, there's no commitment behind it, then the action we're doing is lying, essentially, on a spiritual and emotional level. So I think it's dangerous in that regard, and it's harmful to us as individuals and society when we kind of have this baseline understanding of something so serious and we're using it flippantly and lying in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you using the word commitment there makes me think of an image that was given to me previously, where when intimacy precedes commitment, it cheapens both the intimacy and the commitment. But when the commitment precedes the intimacy, it strengthens both the commitment and the intimacy.
Exactly.
So I think those are pretty good starting points just for understanding what we're talking about. I just realized we haven't specified this. We would say that proper biblical marriage is between a man and a woman. That's a good clarification to make as well.
Yeah.
And we can get into that more maybe here in a little bit. But if we've started with positive definitions of what these things are, now let's talk about what we actually see in the real world. So you are in ministry to young adults and college folks. What are you seeing out in the world of whether or not this is being lived into or applied, either in the Christian, the non-Christian world? How would you describe the state of the culture right now when it comes to these kind of things?
It's a mixed bag for sure. Statistically speaking, I was looking at some research the other day. Pew Research showed that evangelical Christians either have premarital sex or cohabitation on the exact same frequency as people who don't even follow Christ or any religion for that matter, the religious nuns. And so I think in the church, especially with younger people, there's this misunderstanding of the sanctity of what marriage is and the sanctity of what sex is. And both of these things are being undervalued and mistreated due to, who knows what plays into it. It could be kind of a reaction to purity culture. It could be the sexual revolution back in the 60s that influenced us. But yeah, we've lost sight of what the value of sex and marriage is, I think.
Yeah, and I appreciate you touching on purity culture there, and without casting stones at previous generations of ministers or anything like that, because I think they were well-intentioned people doing the best they could with what they had. But if you grew up in kind of 90s, mid-2000s youth group culture, you got told sex is a bad thing, don't have sex, whatever you do, just make sure that you don't have sex, because those youth pastors and youth ministers were looking out for the best interests of those kids, wanting them to be able to preserve that and maintain those biblical standards until such a time as marriage. But a lot of it came across in such a way that you're dirty and broken and Jesus doesn't want you if you've done these things outside of it. So yeah, to some extent, we're kind of dealing with the aftermath of that. And that's part of the reason why we're doing this podcast episode is to talk about a positive Christian view of sex is a good thing, marriage is a good thing. For sex to be a good thing, it needs to be contained within the context of a marital commitment. But the other part in the title of this, just to jump around topics a little bit, we're also talking about cohabitation. It's a big fancy word. It's a $5 word. How would you define cohabitation for us?
I would define it in two different ways, because I've seen it specifically with Christians used in two ways. I would probably venture to say non-Christians probably would only use this in one sense. But definitionally, the way I've encountered it on the ground is one of two. Either I'm living with my partner before marriage, free, self-proclaimingly, of any sexual act. It is maybe pragmatic for finances or whatever, but we are cohabitating. We're living under the same roof together as roommates in a sense. The second way would be I'm living with my partner before marriage and we are having sex, and so I would venture to say that's probably what more non-Christians would probably just say solely on that. But yeah, those are the two ways I've seen this play out on the ground.
Looking to learn more about God and the beauty and mystery of His creation? Check out our short form series called Experience Commentary. Each week, we release a new article where we address these topics and more. The articles can be found on our website, experiencecc.com, or listen to the article anywhere you get your podcasts.
And it is it's not quite shocking, but it is almost shocking how frequent of just a cultural assumption that is of, before you get married, you should live together. The phrase is, why would you not take it for a test drive before you buy the car, and all these different kinds of things.
People aren't cars. People aren't cars.
You are correct. They are not. Yes. So when I've been doing premarital counseling, it seems like the most, well, actually, let's back up even before that. is that a bad thing? Is it really that big of a deal if, look, we know we're going to get married, the wedding's in a couple of months, your lease is up on the apartment, why don't you just go ahead and move in? How would you respond to someone coming up and saying, why shouldn't we do this?
Of course, I'd want to have this conversation in a pastoral manner. So it'd be. I would want to know, why is this a decision you've come to make? For example, I gave the example of pragmatism. This just makes sense for us financially. We're going to get married. Why pay 2 rents when we're going to pay one? We're never going to be married. We're engaged. Whatever the case is, and I would just say that's a great answer if you don't involve God. But God tells us not to put ourselves in circumstances that will cause us to sin. I'll give people the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, you're not having sex during this cohabitation period. Sure. But this is putting you in a circumstance. You're not fleeing temptation. You're not fleeing sexual immorality. You're running to a very, very ripe place for it to occur. And so I would say that's not a good use of wisdom. I would then also say that it could give the impression to other believers who might know you, and they'll see that and be like, oh, they're doing it, and they might not really think about the sex aspect, and they might take for granted that you're having sex, and so that might cause them to stumble and do this and actually have sex, and I would say in that we are sinning by leading other people to stumble, and so I think it's a very serious thing to be careful with and evaluate what are the implications of this.
Yeah, and I like how you started out there talking about how this needs to be a very pastoral kind of conversation that we're having with them, because, there might be people listening to this right now who find themselves in exactly that situation with exactly those kinds of things, and we don't want to be that 2005 youth pastor who's like, this is making you worthless if you do this, and you need, not that they would go that far with it, but all of this, we want it to have a very almost reconciliatory tone, talking about how, this is not God's design and intent for you, but what is the good that you can do right now? What is it with your situation that you're able to honor God with and move towards more of the kind of model that he has for you?
Yeah, and to that as well, like, I wouldn't want someone to feel condemned in that. Again, talking about my background, like I had this view of God as this angry father shaking his fist in the sky kind of thing. And so I don't want to put that impression on anyone. But I would just encourage people, like, if you're doing this for pragmatic reasons, God's way might be harder in some ways, but it's so much better. And taking it back to your test drive analogy a minute ago, like you take the car for the test drive. Well, I think ultimately the reason people do this is they're not evaluating the deeper levels of like what this is doing spiritually and emotionally to them and what they're staying. And so it's not for it's not because of malice. I think it's just this is what culture does, and it's just this, we're just moving with culture kind of thing. But we need to evaluate, like, okay, to go with that analogy, this car is going to break down one day, or it's going to get older. A newer model will come out, a better, faster model will come out, whatever the case is. And so if we're going into marriage kind of with this test drive mentality, then we're going into it from a selfish place if we're really examining our hearts. And it's kind of like, okay, I need to see if this fits me. When really marriage is about, I'm giving myself to this person, and I'm committing to this person for better or for worse, in sickness or in health, no matter what the case is. And so if you're coming into a marital union already with kind of this like more self-centered, for lack of a better word, heart posture, then what happens when you see the faster car later down the road, or the car that you were with tears up, whatever the case is. And so marriage, like you said a minute ago, like it should be the commitment first. It should proceed. So I would just encourage people, like, do the hard thing and either stop cohabitating or just get married. Just go ahead. Why are you waiting? We don't need this big, elaborate ceremony. It's a covenant between you and God in front of others. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and I want to tag on two different things to that. One of them that Greg used to say a lot as well, especially in his premarital counseling, is that the first and the last thought that you have about your spouse should be, how can I serve this person? So if we come into marriage with that kind of mindset, we're both going to have a lot better time than if it's the mindset of, well, you make me happy, I make you happy, so as long as we're both happy, then we can both be happy together. Problem is, some days you're not going to like each other. You're not going to be very happy. But the question is, are you going to live out the commitment that you made at the time that you got married, or are you going to say, this isn't so much fun anymore. I'm going to see if I can find something else better. And on that note, the second thing I was going to say is that I got this phrase from a professor at my seminary, that Christian morality is reality. So when we're talking about these things like containing sex within the covenant of marriage and saving living together until we're able to fully live into that covenant, that can come across to people as, you just don't want me to have fun. You're just concerned about what I'm doing in the bedroom, and you're just trying to keep me from enjoying something because of whatever weird psychological reasons that you have for doing that. Really, what we're doing is we want the best thing for people. We can edit this in or edit this out at a later time. We want people to have the best sex possible. We want people to have the best marriage possible. We want your marriage to succeed and for you to have as God-honoring and as pleasurable a time as you can. And the way to do that is the way that God has told us that he designed this thing. If he is the creator and the designer of it, he probably has the best plan for it. And again, this is not some like prosperity, like, oh, you're always going to have a good time. Everything is going to be great. There are going to be hard days. But if we look at the way that the creator of the universe designed the creation to be enjoyed, and we say, I think I can do a little bit better than that, we're kind of off on the wrong foot there. So we've talked about a little bit of a positive view of it, a little bit of how it gets distorted in culture. Now let's talk a little bit more specifically to people who find themselves in these situations. Maybe they are cohabitating, maybe they are engaging in premarital sex, and they say, hey, we want to stop, but we just don't know how. What are some just practical advice that you would give to them?
Yeah, again, I will use the best case scenario as an example. Like, let's say, yeah, we're living together, but we're not having sex. It's for pragmatic reasons. I would again say, I jumped the gun a little bit maybe, but what is stopping you from doing the hard thing and getting out of this circumstance and pursuing Christ today? Because it is so worth it. Honoring Christ is always going to be worth it every time, 10 out of 10 times. And so whether that is, okay, like we're going to be surrounded by our church community. And again, that's why church community is so important, because you have people there that you can lean on, who can support you, who can help you figure out solutions to these things. And so that's one option, or just get married. Marriage is not about who's there and who's not there. It's about one person being there, and it's God. And he's there presiding over this union and this covenant in the presence of a couple people. And so I would just encourage you, either figure out a solution, search out your church community for help, or just get married. And just let your actions be reflected on both ends of the spectrum, both with the commitment and with the lifestyle. And so that would be my encouragement for that. Now, if it is a couple that is having sex, I would give this same encouragement, but before that covenant, before those vows are said, before the union, before God and man is proclaimed, that's going to have to stop, because that is ultimately not honoring to Christ. 1 Corinthians 7 talks about different kinds of sexual immorality, and one of those is fornication, and that is sex outside of a covenant marriage, and it's because that is there because it is detrimental, it is harmful to have sex outside of marriage. And to give you a little, more insight into my background, like I was born out of wedlock. My mom and dad never married. I never knew them to even date when I was alive. I can't tell you how much like turmoil that put me in as a kid. Put my mom in a lot of turmoil, because outside of that marital covenant, and again, some people have that even covenant a little bit too twisted, and it's very flimsy and can fall apart very easily. That's a whole nother conversation. But without that covenant, there's no protection there for that child who might come from that union. And so for me, it was very easy for my dad to just dip out. Didn't see the man for 7 years or hear from him. And so that put me through so much just hurt growing up. And thank God my mom is now married and my stepdad's amazing, and I have a little sister from their marriage. And it's wonderful now, and I wouldn't trade the life that God has given me, but it hurt. And so I just want people to think about, like, without that covenant bond there, what can come from sex outside of that union. And it can not only hurt yourself, it hurt my mom seeing me go through all that. And so it can not only hurt themselves, but it hurts kids and other people. It's not just what's happening in the bedroom. It spills out into other areas for sure.
Absolutely. And I think a good note to emphasize on your story as well, and just talking about this topic in general, is there is a path forward to restoration. If people find themselves engaging in these kinds of things, you're not stuck in that. You're not permanently damaged by that. Jesus died so that we can have forgiveness of our sins, including the sins we commit as Christians. Right. So if you find yourself in that position, there is a path forward. The question is, do you want to honor God in holiness like that? And if so, like you said earlier, God is a warm and loving God who wants to welcome his children back home. But the question is, do we want to pursue that end? So I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up that part of the topic. We do have a new special segment on the Common Questions podcast series. We're going to end with a lightning round, rapid fire questions just to round it out. So, Brayden, tell me this. Are you a morning person or are you a night person?
Ooh, that is dependent on what mood I'm in, but as of late, morning.
Okay. Books or movies?
Movies.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Nonfiction.
Favorite nonfiction movie?
Oh. So we're specifically going on fiction or nonfiction movies. I would have to say probably Hacksaw Ridge.
Okay, that's a good one. What's the last concert that you went to?
Does Passion count?
We'll count it. That's acceptable. And a question submitted by our friends from the Room for Nuance podcast. How many holes does a straw have?
It has one hole.
Thanks for listening to the Common Questions podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.